What's going on, you guys? I am back again, this time with a water cooling basic tutorial. I am no expert. I'm not going to say I'm an expert because there's so much to learn about water cooling that you can't say that you're a complete expert because there's so much to learn and everything is always changing. So I wanted to go over the basics because I've seen it all over the forums and on the pages, and fortunately I have an abundance of water cooling items, and I wanted to show a few people different types of blocks, different types of fans, and a basic setup, and kind of get the rundown of what to expect when water cooling. So here is what I have for you guys. So we're gonna start with the different type of blocks, because I do have a couple extra blocks laying around. So we'll start with the CPU block. So here I have, it's a Raystorm from XSPC. This is a universal block. Depending on where you buy your bracket from, you can get an Intel one, or you can get an AMD block. I think AMD is still using these types. I know the new AMD is coming out. So this is what the AMD setup looks like for XSPC. This did work perfect, and it still does. I'm sure if I were to clean it out and service it, it will do fine. But I am currently running a mono block that has, I'm not sure if you can see it from here. Let's see. So as you can see from here, mine has the full motherboard, chipset block, and everything for the CPU, so I no longer have to use just the CPU block separately. So to move on, so that's the basic CPU block. You'll find different types. Popular ones are EK. I used XSPC at the time because I was a noob. And not saying these are bad. They have different blocks specifically for X99. These are great. It's all depending on your style. This XSPC one has LED inserts. So if you want to add LEDs and make your whole system stick out, that is the way to do it. Moving on, and I highly don't recommend this, but I've done it, so I kind of want to show you, and I've seen people do it. This is a universal GPU block. I don't know if I have a spare GPU laying around. Give me a sec here. Alright, so I do have a spare GT610 video card, separate project. So basically what you do is you just slap it right on there, and it cools the core. And what I did was get copper heat sinks to put on top of the RAM. Alright, and so just to continue, this is just a nickel plated water block. This is it's actually expensive for what this is. I paid $50 for this, and it worked. I put it on my GTX 780s because at the time I was like, oh, let me get these. They're cheaper. Oh well, they'll work, which they did. They worked great, but it looked ugly. It was horrible. So basically, you have in and out ports here or in and out ports here, but if you're running an SLI setup and this is your core block, it is a pain. If you can check out my old videos with my Core X9, you could see exactly what I'm talking about. It was like a Frankenstein machine. Had tubes and all kinds of crap sticking out everywhere. Moving on from there, this is the full GTX. Well, this one says 780, or the GTX Ti version, but mine were only the 6 gig 780s. So this is a copper backing. So you can see where all the thermal pads were for the memory. Missing one, but so you had the room for your power phases. It actually cooled. This is a full size block. There are some universal blocks that cut off here that just cool the core and your memory. This cools everything. It has thermal pads here for your power phases and everything to keep your entire video card cool. And for things like this to maintain, I kind of like to get the clear ones. Like on my 1080s, I have a clear one. That way, if I notice the temperature rising on my GPU, I could just look underneath it to see if water is getting clogged by whatever is in the fins. And so I highly recommend the ones that you can see through. Not only does it look pretty cool, it's easy to maintain. So if you have a clog somewhere, your pressure is building up, you could see right away if there's stuff building up in your loop. So that is your basic water block, your full-size water block for your 780s. This was basically the same size with the 980s and 980 Ti's as well. So moving on to fittings. Fittings are one thing that people kind of get confused on. There are metric and imperial fittings. So when you get fittings, make sure they're the right size. With me today, what I have today is the 7/16 inner diameter and the 5/8 outer diameter tubing. I have Primo Chill NXS PC. So I have the Primo Flex from Primo Chill. Let's see if I have. Make sure to get the exact size fittings and the exact size tubing when you're ordering your tube. So let's see here. So as you can see here, where is it? 7/16 inner diameter, 5/8 inch outer diameter. So they do have it in millimeters. I don't recommend that too much with hard tubing because you will more than likely have a leak if you're playing with the sizes. You want the exact size when it comes to hard tubing, especially for the outer diameter. But we'll get to that. Just wanted to show you some things to look for when purchasing different types of tubing and different types of fittings. So what I have here, this is a barb compression fitting. So it has the barb. So I guess we'll break it down to the basics. So you can get a barb fitting where it's just the barb. You put the tubing over it. It's easier when it's in something. So you put the fitting over it, and you could actually put a brace over the barb, and you could call it good there. This is why it's a little easier with barb compression fittings. So instead of getting a little tie down to clamp that down, some people actually don't even use something to clamp down. They actually call that good. Don't recommend that, but to each their own on their system. But this is what I have is the barb and compression fitting. So you stick the compression collar on the other side, or in your actual loop you want to put it on before you put on the fitting. So you slide it down, and then you just tighten it up until you don't actually have to get it all the way threaded, until it's about hand tight, finger tight. It'll hold the tube just tight. You don't need to crank it all the way down, because on some blocks, if you were to crank it all the way down, you could actually crack the acrylic blocks. So right there is good enough, and it is perfect to where it won't come off. So as you can see, I can't even get that off. So that's on there pretty tight. But that's the difference between a barbed and compression fitting. And we'll bring out the other ones. Give me a sec here, guys. Alright, so what I have next are hardline tubing compression fittings. Yeah, just so I want to make this clear, this is also a compression fitting, but it's a barb compression fitting. And these are for the hardline tubing. As you can see here, it's just, so there's no barb in it. It's just a compression fitting that pushes... It presses a O-ring around it. So we'll kind of, so this is what I have here is 1/2 inch diameter. So 1/2 inch outer diameter. So when it comes to hardline tubing, the most important thing is the outer diameter. So this one's 1/2 inch outer diameter, because here's why it's important to have the right the right measurement fittings for hardline. So actually, we'll do it the right way, I guess. So say your system's complete, you have everything cut. Slide on that fitting. So this is the compression cap or collar, whatever you want to call it. Then you got your O-ring. You put this, so I'm just trying to get this, so we'll just kind of do it on this water block here. So what you do, and this isn't a perfect cut, but this will actually work. So I'll show you the difference between this hard. So there's different types, but there's this one. This is the Monsoon compression fittings, free center compression fittings. But these ones actually give you a little more play when it comes to making sure that's straight or not. So you can just place it straight in there. Slide down the tube, slide down the collar cap, or the collar compression cap. Put it on there, you spin it on. So what it does is this compresses that O-ring to your fitting, and it compresses around the actual tubing. That's what actually keeps the line from leaking. So there you go. These are the revolver fittings from Primo Chill, and these ones are from Monsoon. So as you can see, it just slides right on there, and it's actually pretty tight. So don't be too afraid. You know, for beginners, people like to use the compression fittings because it's a little less. I guess it's a little easier for some people because you're able to just cut the tubes, and it flexes whatever way you want. Compression or hardline tubing, you have to bend the tubing, which I can go over as well. So, give me a sec here. Basically, these are your basic fittings. It's kind of weird. I was trying to look for a whole set. I have a whole nother set of these as well. But here is another style. So I figured I'd show you both styles. This one's a little more difficult. People say it's good, but I found it really hard to use. So as you can tell, it's a different type of it's called a free center fitting. So you can actually take an Allen key, tighten this up. So as you can see, there's no gosh, I'm just trying to show you guys the difference between the free center compression fitting and your traditional compression fitting. So as you can see, there's differences. You know, you have the O-ring that goes here. This one has an O-ring that sits flat. So when it comes down to this, gosh, I can't remember what it's actually called. I know it's the Free Center Monsoon. I can't remember if it was the Revolver series. So basically, the way this works, this is why it's a little more difficult. So you have this collar that you have to glue at the end. You take a UV glue that you put around here, and yes, you do have to get a UV light to cure the adhesive. And so this literally sits on top of there. This is why it's a little harder. I know it's a little scarier for people. Oh, got the O-ring stuck in there. Give me a second. So, okay. And just for reference, you guys, I did this the wrong way. You actually have to put this on first with the O-ring that sits in it. Sorry, hold on here. Okay, so you want to keep that O-ring in there. So you want to slide it on first before you actually put on the other piece. So okay, so just like the other one, you keep the O-ring on and then the cap, but you want to put this on first before you glue this on, because you actually cannot take it off after. After that, it's permanent. That's it. You can't take it off without having to buy a new collar and having to glue it back on. So, let's see here. Not sure how well you could see that. So, this sits flat like that. This comes down. And this one is a little less forgiving. You actually have to get the cut perfect. Almost, actually damn near perfect to get this to work. It looks amazing. I like it, but it's hard for me to say this is something you guys should get. It's tough. So, there you go. Got it on there for you. That is the two different types of hardline tubing that I have with me available. But as you can see how much tougher that was compared to literally just throwing on an O-ring, putting the tube in there, and then just putting the compression on. So that right there isn't the typical type that you would see, but it is very tough. So if you are going monsoon, remember to get the glue, and you have to get a UV light to cure the adhesive. So there's a couple questions that people ask on bending tube. So this is the silicone tube that you use to put in the tubing to bend. So you have different sizes. This is kind of where it got crazy on my end. So I have 3 different types, 3 different brands. If you're bending tube, you need one of these, because when you start to add heat to it, the tube will collapse and will look like crap and block flow if you were to use it. Oh, sorry. So just to start with, this is actually the tube that Primo Chill sent with the kit. As you can see, it's really tough. I can't even get that in there. People are like, oh, use olive oil and soapy water. Then you have to clean out the whole tube. Such a pain in the butt. See, this is actually the tube it came with. This is supposedly 1/2 inch. This one is the same thing. This one's supposed to be 1/2 inch. And see, it actually gets in there a little smoother. I'm able to just push it through, but I actually had to use a cheese grater on this and sand it down a little. So I bought I think this one's a Monsoon or Primo Chill. Can't remember which one they had. So this one fits perfect. Look, that slides through the whole thing. If you can, make sure you find the right size silicone fitting. These claim to be all the same size, but this is the only one I found that fits directly in the tube. So you just apply heat, and you could either get a tool like this. This one's cheap, $5. So you take this, and then you'd bend it to whatever degree you need. So if you can, find a silicone tube that actually fits in it, without having to use olive oil or all kinds of crap. This is the best way I found. to bend tubing. So when you are searching, make sure to look for the right silicone tube for bending. While I have this tube out, this is also an XSPC cutter. This is made for both flex tubing and hardline. This is actually, I keep saying hardline. I should have included this. This is PTEG. It's not acrylic, so the acrylic will crack if you were to use something like this. But I wanted to show you, so this is PTEG. You're able to just cut it. PTEG would crack if you were to do that. You'd have to use your typical pipe cutter and, you know, go around in circles to cut it just like a normal pipe. So here's flex tubing, same thing. Easy. So PTEG is something I recommend. If you're going to go hardline tubing, PTEG is a lot more forgiving than acrylic. So keep that in mind when you guys are finding, you know, looking to buy water cooling stuff. So here's a couple bends I did with an old one. I keep old ones around because you never know when that actually might come in handy if you need a 90 or whatever. So that is the basic equipment for hard line and flex tubing with fittings and everything. So to move on, we'll go on to fans and hardware, you know, radiators and everything. So sorry my desk is a mess here, but I'm trying to keep this video as short as possible. The big questions that always are asked: what fan should you get for your radiator? It all depends, but in a generic, you know, general rule of thumb for radiators is the SP. So people always ask, what's the difference between SP and AF? They have the same CF, the same type of flow through, but it's the way the SP actually directs the flow. So as you can see, this one on the left is an AF. This one on the right is an SP. You can see the fan blades are different. One is for massive airflow, like so when this one's intaking, it's for massive airflow, so it blows outward. So when it intakes, it blows out into a case. So that's why they consider the AF a case fan, where the SP directs airflow and tries to, I'm not saying it doesn't go everywhere, but the SP is designed to try to direct the flow through the radiator or through obstructions. So you have hard drive cages in front. SP is the best one to use, especially when you have restrictive flow. So that's the differences between AF and SPs. You know, I don't have anything to measure flow, so I can't really show you. Maybe I'll go get one of those little $20 airflow meters. But that is the difference between an AF and SP. This is a standard 240 radiator. The way they measure it is, so this is a 120 fan, 120, 120, one is a 240. So 240 millimeter radiator. This one is 25 millimeters thick. You can get up to, gosh, I think 80 millimeters. So you can get one that's about that thick nowadays. For me, I have in mine, I don't know if you guys, whoever's watching this, haven't watched any of my other videos. I have a 64 millimeter thick 480 up top, 360 on the side here, and then a 560 on the bottom. So the differences between a 480 and a 560, I'll take the camera over there to be honest. So here is a 560 millimeter radiator. These are SP 140s. So 4 of these fans equal 560. So 140, 140, 140. While the top here is a 480. I have 4 120s, 480 millimeter. So if you're trying to figure out all the measurements, those are the differences between the different styled radiators. So, so I guess in general rule of thumb with cooling, they recommend a 120 for each component. So, say you have a CPU, GPU, so 240. Or if you have two GPUs, get a 360. Or if you're doing some crazy overclocks, I'd recommend a 480 at minimum. A 480 at minimum for two GPUs and one CPU. Or say you're doing the full motherboard, the GPU, the CPU, I'd recommend at least two radiators. Even say do a 480 and a 360. The more radiator space you have or surface you have, the better cooling you're gonna have. Yeah, it'll work the same. Some people think that, oh well, you could do it with 360. I can guarantee you, if you were to throw my two 1080s and a 5930K on a 360 and I overclock it to what I have now, you will not see the same type of temperatures I have in my system with a 360 millimeter radiator. So it's all depending on how much you want to overclock and how much of your system you're wanting to cool. Some people just want to do a CPU. So CPU, 240, that'll be just fine. Thicker radiators, like I said, it all depends on how you want your setup, your system set up. But I recommend, if you're doing a setup with a thicker radiator, do push-pull. The more airflow you can get out of it, the better. I know people will argue back and forth whether push-pull works differently or how much the temperature will drop between push or pull. I do push-pull on mine because it's overkill. But if you have a thick radiator, push-pull all the way. The more airflow you can get through it, the better. So we'll move on from the radiator. I hope I was able to get you guys all... Oh, actually, sorry. One thing I do want to point out, do not mix your metals. I found that out the hard way. I know a lot of antimicrobial additives like PT Nuke and stuff will help you when it comes to different metals, but I still don't recommend it. So say keep them all copper. So copper, and then a copper radiator. Different types of metals will react differently with the mix. So say you have copper and aluminum. So this is nickel. Nickel's not too bad with copper. When you start to mix cheaper radiators that have aluminum cores, so and I hate to say it and admit it, but my Thermaltake 480 is an aluminum radiator. The core is aluminum. My other two radiators are copper. Thermaltake claims that the zinc coating will protect it, but zinc will only last so long. So eventually that's going to break down and my whole system's going to look like poo. But but that's just a fair warning with mixing different types of metals. So we'll move on. So what I have here is, this is my old reservoir and pump combo. I think it's a SwiftTech pump with a Thermaltake reservoir. This is a 300 millimeter reservoir. It is bigger than most people would want. A 240 millimeter would do just fine. And like I said, it all depends on how much you want to cool. From my experience and what I've read online, the more fluid you're able to cool, the better for temperatures. The more consistent your temperatures will be. Because say if you have a small reservoir, which they do, you have one this big, and you're cooling two GTX 1080s in your CPU, and say you only have a 360 millimeter radiator, you're actually flowing warm water through that entire system. Because you're not giving it, there's not enough fluids to cool and not enough radiator space to cool that amount of fluid. So try to balance it out, radiator surface and the amount of fluid you have in your system. Tried to cover as much as I could with water cooling. Another thing to consider, if you don't want to bend, this is a little more expensive. This is a little more expensive route to go. So say you don't want to bend your tubing, you can get these. Some of them have compression fittings already on it, and you could just get a 90. You don't need to actually hit up your tube and bend them. I have a bunch of them because I actually doubted myself on whether or not I could bend tubing. Turned out I could bend them quite well. And then I even bought a bunch of fittings just in case. So most people won't have that type of luxury to be able to buy an extra amount of fittings and tubing, because whether or not they know to bend or not. So it's all up to your choices on what you want. I just wanted to give you guys kind of a general idea of water cooling and the different type of things to look for. Water cooling isn't just as simple as putting a computer together. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. So just make sure not to rush it. Don't rush your build. Especially when you're doing hardline tubing. You want it done right. Don't rush the entire setup. Take your time, and I hope this video helped you guys kind of give you an open eye on what to look for and what to expect. So if you guys like this video, like and subscribe. Let me know what else you guys want to know about water cooling, and I will see if I have the parts to see if I can do it or not, or what other questions you have in general about water cooling. I'll catch you guys in the next video. I hope this helps.